Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today I'm coming at you with a very late Vritra video. So it's not going to be late for us here on an A in the sense that she's going to be getting a banner here real soon with the Carnamas event. However, I never covered her originally when she came out on an A. This has just had to do with schedule conflicts and the fact that at the time there were a lot of JP units getting released. So given the fact that she's a permanent unit, I kind of put her a little bit lower on the pecking order in terms of priority, and I never really had circled back and gotten her. But now we're going to be covering her here because I feel like she will at least be a little bit relevant to you guys with the upcoming banner. Again, you guys can see permanent unit. There's no disclaimer here about her being limited in any sort. So Vritra is one of those units that can kind of always spook you. But it's still a good idea to kind of cover her to give you guys at least my 2 cents on how you guys can use her effectively and where she's strong at. Again, I do feel like Vritra is sort of caught in a weird situation. She is an AoE arts 5-star permanent lancer. So she's kind of caught in this weird situation between there being other welfares out there, other really like highly valued and highly beloved Lancer units, and again, juggernauts out there like Roma and Melisson out there that can kind of just really pump out the damage nowadays. So Vitra's still in this just kind of weird spot, but still her biggest thing and probably the best thing that's going to be serving her is not only her power mods, but also again just that fact that she is permanent. So you will be able to get spooked by her, you will be able to get potentially multiple copies over time, or you could try to roll for her devotedly and beef her up. Again, a lot of people do like Vritra, so don't feel bad if you're one of those people. I'm not trying to make her sound like she's bad or anything like that. She's a very capable AoE Lancer. Let's go ahead and let's start out by talking about her kit here. Basically, her stats right here to begin with. So, as you guys can see, sorry, my telestrator's messing up a little bit. The attack stat here is at about 12.3k. This is definitely a very robust attack stat. This is very high. It's not like, the highest in the game or anything like that, but this is a good attack stat. It's definitely something we like to see with the 5-star characters. It means that they will potentially card hard, both with their steroids active and without them active. So it's certainly a good thing. But the attack stat is not the end-all be-all for overall damage output, as there's many factors that go into the calculation of damage. Her HP stat, though, on the other hand, is a little bit more on the anemic side. Thankfully, Vritra does at least have some survivability in her kit, so this is not a complete concern, but this is going to be something you're going to need to watch out for. Thankfully, with her being an arts unit, you're bound to have quite a few of, really good and supportive arts units around her. So I don't think it's too big of a concern. You have kind of the best setup for that sort of thing in the game with arts and all of the options that it has. Her attribute here is going to be Sky Attribute. She's got only 88 star absorption. It's quite a bit lower than the standard Lancer star absorption, but again, this just has to do with her being an arts unit particularly. We also have a star generation of 12.2. Again, just kind of a little bit lower due to the fact that she is an arts unit. Her NP charge attack here is only 0.55, but this is actually pretty much the average, so we don't have to worry about it too much. And Vritra does have quite a bit of charge built into her kit, so this is to me not going to be the biggest of concerns. Got the 4% standard sort of Lancer NP charge defense there, a death rate of 24%, which is slightly below average, but still pretty much right on. And an alignment that is both neutral and evil. So again, if there's somebody out there that is an evil buffer, they can certainly give her some love. Neutral is a lot rarer to actually be able to receive buffs for. Her gender here is going to be female, and you can see she has a laundry list of traits, so let's go through them. She's an animal characteristic servant. She's demonic. She's demonic beast servant, divine spirit, which is not divine. That's a little bit different. Dragon, humanoid, immune to pigify, levitating servant, non-hominide servant, obstacle maker, normal servant, 7 night servant, and weak to anima elish. So again, quite a bit of exploitable traits there. Vritra has very frequently been used as the antagonist in events and, just as sort of the punching bag for a lot of farming nodes. So it's kind of why I think they have her so frequently featured, is because of just the sheer amount of traits that she actually does have, so that you have a lot to exploit against her. Looking at her deck here, you guys can see she's not got the standard Lancer deck. Standard Lancer deck would actually be a second Buster card right here, but instead she's got 2 Arts cards and 2 Quick cards. So she's going to be a little bit more refund oriented, less hard hitting oriented here. Again, probably another reason for the higher overall attack stat. Definitely a good thing for her to have this here. Her hit counts, at least on the Arts and Quick cards, are certainly average or higher. They're really good there. The extra attack is also average. The Buster card is the only one that is below average at only 2 hits. But since it's the Buster card and there's only 1 of it, this is not that big of a deal. Again, Buster, out of all the card types, it can have a factor when it comes to hit counts, but it's usually the star generation that's going to be what's impacted by that. So we don't care too much with Buster having low hit counts. Now, taking a look at the active skills here, you guys can see her first skill is an increase to her Arts performance for 3 turns and an increase to her critical star absorption for Arts cards for 1 turn. So this is going to be 30% Arts up at rank 10, kind of the standard multi-turn steroid here at 30%. Good for both, damage output as well as refund. And then the Arts card absorption is going to at least allow you to soak any sort of stars to the actual card that you'll probably want to pop off with her the most with, given the fact that she'll probably have other supporting units around her giving her Arts buffs. So again, this is going to make that Arts card potentially even able to crit a little bit more, and that could be a good thing for her. All of this is on a 5-turn cooldown, so again, not too high there. If you do find yourself in a more of a challenge environment running alongside, say, like a Tamamo or something like that, it's definitely a good thing to have skills on a low cooldown. Her second skill here is going to be an increase to the party's divinity damage for 3 turns. Again, up to 30%, so it is a party-wide 3-turn power mod for divinity here, and that's really solid for her. Definitely one of her main niches, if you ask me, because again, she's not necessarily going to beat some of the other Lancers in damage. So the ability for her to not only do good damage herself, but also give and confer that niche to other people in the party to make them hit harder as well, potentially, is a good thing. And I think that's something you guys got to keep in mind when you start considering uses for Vritra. However, you're going to want to lore this skill regardless because it is also one of her NP charge skills. And so you can see it's 30% 30% maxed out here. And then again, all of this on a 6-turn cooldown makes it really nice. Her third skill is going to be the Eternally Immortal Demon EX here. This is going to grant her gut status of 1 time 5 turns, so it's got 2 turns longer in duration. 3000 HP is what you'll revive with at the max rank. Definitely a nice thing there. But from here on, it's going to charge her own NP gauge every turn for 5 turns by up to 10%. So another skill you might want to lore. This one's a little bit more like up to you. You don't necessarily have to lore this one, but it's a good idea to do so because 1, it's going to minimize the cooldown, which is pretty long on this skill, and kind of up your survivability a little bit. And 2, it's going to keep you kind of going, hitting harder, since you also get 20% NP damage for the party 1 time 5 turns here. So again, somebody that can buff the party as well as herself here. I do feel like it's really, really nice that she has this. Makes her a pretty fluid looper. It also makes her able to kind of, again, support other damage dealers in the party. For passive skills, she's got Magic Resistance A here just for an additional 20% debuff resistance. Going to make it harder to land those debuffs on her. And Dragonkind A that increases her own Buster performance by 10% and reduces her damage taken, again, with a damage cut of 180. So kind of a unique Madness enhancement variant here. And certainly a nice one in the way that that's going to work. With regards to her Append skills, I'm going to recommend the mana loading. It's certainly going to be good for her as, again, getting that 20% charge right out of the gate, combined with something like that 30% that she has, can cover you for already just turn 1, 50% of the charge right there. And that's up to you if you want to actually activate her skills earlier. Again, with regards to putting her in an arts comp, you can kind of move skills around, especially if it's a double Castoria setup. So having the mana loading out here and already up and online can kind of allow you to defer a Castoria skill till turn 2. So that may be to your benefit to do so, but again, it's up to you if you want to actually go for this first. It would be my recommendation, but you don't necessarily have to. Looking at the third one here, you can see this will increase her own damage against Avenger enemies. There's not too much actual synergy here, so I don't think this is a great use of your third append. The fifth append skill is obviously going to reduce the cooldown some a little bit, at least the first time of the use. This could be good depending on what you're doing with her. The fourth append here is going to increase her critical damage, but given the fact she's an arts unit, you're probably not going to be doing that too often, so it definitely depends. And then the first skill being the extra attack finesse can certainly help her if you do get a card chain, maybe off the back of an MP or something like that. So again, up to you to determine. To me, the only one that really stands out is the mana loading, but it's up to you if you have, again, additional copies of her and more coins to spend. The Noble Phantasm here is a 3-hit AoE Arts Noble Phantasm. So again, if you're up against 3 enemies in a wave, that's going to be up to 9 hits. Certainly can be a good amount, but we usually like to see more hit counts on the NP. Still not the worst thing in the world. This is going to deal damage to all enemies and then seal their skills for 1 turn. This is definitely at least nice because it'll lock down the enemy's ability to respond. However, keep in mind whenever you seal an enemy's skills, they're just going to start hitting you. So that may or may not be to your advantage. It may just depend on your current strategy and what you want to do as to whether or not you use the NP for something like that right away. But it is something you can still do. This is also going to reduce their critical attack chance by 20% for 3 turns, which combined with the skill seal will at least kind of soften the blow for that carding. So as the enemy starts to hit you, they're going to at least be less likely to crit you. 20% is not the highest out there, but it is at least a hefty amount. Again, with the way crit calculation works on enemies, this is certainly going to limit some of the enemy's ability to crit you. And taking a look at the overcharge effect here, you can see it's also going to reduce their arts resistance for 3 turns. Unfortunately, this is not before damage, this is after damage, so you're not going to gain the benefit of this in a conventional farm setup because it's going to apply to the enemies and you'll probably have killed them already and moved into the next wave. However, if you do end up against an enemy where it's maybe a little bit beefier than you expected and you lowball the NP, then again, you'll get the arts resist down applied for 3 turns, and it is at least 10%. So if you have any follow-up arts cards, that can potentially help you, or maybe if you're using somebody else's arts NP right behind her, she can kind of be your setup man for that. So again, there are potential uses for this, but it's usually always better to have it apply first, so that way it impacts both the NP's refund and damage output. Still, definitely a good thing to have, and if you are in a challenge environment, you're going up against the same wave, the same enemies over and over again, you can kind of stack this due to its multi-turn duration. So that's, again, going to be kind of Vritra's kit here. Let's go ahead and let's talk about craft essence recommendations. So Vritra, we kind of had already talked about her NP charge rate here. So again, she can actually be a Black Grail looper. She can start from 0. So I'm just going to kind of recommend starting from 0 and getting the most firepower that you can, at least against 3 enemy waves, and to some extent even against 2 enemy waves, Vritra can pull this off. Though it definitely depends on what you're facing, and it certainly is something that you need to kind of watch out for. Still, it's going to be my recommendation if you feel like you're kind of a little bit, treading the line a little bit thin there on the NP generation. You can always either step up to more charge or potentially try to find some other CE out there that's, not quite Black Grail, but might enhance NP generation while still enhancing damage more than a 50% CE would. So any of those can be a thing. Vritra also doesn't have Invuln Pierce anywhere in her kit, so my recommendation here of something like Valentine's Witches would be really good. It's all attack scaling, so it's certainly worthy of leveling up if you have it in MLB. And again, it's going to ignore invincibility, increase NP damage by 25%, and increase the NP gen rate by 10%. So certainly a nice one, but it is a gotcha CE from the Valentine's event this year. So if you didn't get it, again, just try to look out for some other sort of Invuln Pierce CE. As long as it has the ability to enhance your damage, it's probably going to be a pretty good one. So that could be something that you could use with something like her. If you do find yourself in a situation where you need some starting charge, Ocean Flyer can be a potentially really good one. It literally features her. So again, it's also all attack scaling. It was a welfare from the old summer event. And again, you guys can see it's going to give you 8% arts up, 15% NP damage, and 50% starting charge. Worthy of level 100ing, worthy of leveling all the way up. So I highly recommend, again, getting it if you, at some point in the future, if you get the opportunity. But again, it's up to you to determine if this is one of the 50% you want to use. There is another one in the shop that's worthy of mentioning. This one is actually in the Rare Prism shop. It's going to cost you 5 Rare Prism copies per copy. So again, up to 25 for a full MLB of Fondant au Chocolat. But Fondant is a very infamous CE from back in the day. It is a 50% starting charge CE. It is all attack scaling, and it increases damage against divine enemies by 30%. So another 30% power mod added in addition to her second skill there. So definitely something where you might be able to stack the power mods and get a little bit more damage. It may not be the best thing to use on her in terms of damage output, but it's worthy of noting that this does exist. And for units that are anti-divine, this can kind of help them out even more. So again, up to you to determine if this is one that you want to buy, but it is a permanently available, fairly strong 50% starting charge CE. So now let's talk about Vritra's actual refund. So again, as we mentioned here, she has the 3-hit NP, and she has, again, 0.55% NP charge rate. Basically, if you're using 2 times Castorias with Vritra against 3 neutral enemies, so basically a 3 enemy wave there, you're going to be looking at, again, with only 3 hits of overkill, so 3 out of a potential 9 hits against 3 enemies. Basically, that's assuming 1 hit each. That's assuming you killed the wave. At that point, you're going to be looking at about 73.76% refund. This is kind of a weird number. You don't have to worry about it too much. Basically, double Castoria is kind of a little bit overkill with her in that regard, because even at 0 overkill hits, you would still end up at like 64, 65%. So in other words, you're going to exceed the 50% breakpoint that you would kind of need with her, no matter what you do, as long as you're having that double Castoria. If we start looking at 2 neutral enemies, though, so instead of a 3 enemy wave, a 2 enemy wave, this is going to mean 2 out of a potential 6 hits with the NP instead, since we've lost an enemy to actually hit. At that point, then, you need at least 2 out of 6 hits to be able to hit the 50% breakpoint. It's actually going to be 52%. So again, Vritra can loop over 2 enemy waves, so as long as the node is 2x, she should be capable of doing it. That's 2 enemies in the first wave, 2 enemies in the second, and 1 enemy, or sorry, any amount of enemies in the third wave. So definitely something to keep note of is that, yes, she's at least a robust enough looper that she can operate even outside of the normal confines and still kind of start from 0. So it's definitely a good thing. By the way, just TLDR, those refund numbers that we put there do include the 10% refund per turn that she has. Again, it's just something that we're kind of used to saying, but something that we still kind of need to disclose. Let's look at Vritra's actual, again, compositions and kind of how the charge is going to work on her. In a 3-3x neutral node here, we can actually get away with Castoria, Proto Merlin, and Shu Fu instead of double Castoria. This is basically going to mean we're going to start out with the Append, her mana loading maxed. We're going to go ahead and pop her 30% charge skill. It's going to bring her up to 50% right off the bat. Then from there, we're going to use all of Zhu Fu's skills, get her up 30% more, and then use the remaining Castoria 20% skill right there to bring her up to 100%. Going to fire off the NP. She's going to refund about 69%, kind of right there with that nice even break point of 70%. And then we're going to use the other Castoria's skill. And again, you know, pretty much after you'd used the Zhu Fu, you probably should have rotated, brought in the Proto Merlin, used her arts buff there in turn 1. So again, that's going to get you that 69%. So you'll use the remaining 30% off Castoria, bring you up to full one more time, fire off the NP. Then from there, she's going to be at 69% plus the 10% refund from activating Vritra's third skill, plus 20% from Proto Merlin, and boom, there you go. You've got enough charge to do the NP the final time. Looking at the next scenario here, we've got 3-3x neutral again. We've got double Castoria now, though, with basically a Fragment of 2004 as your Mystic Code. So again, this is going to be the NP Jin Mystic Code. So turn 1, we start out with the maxed out Append. We basically pop her 30% charge. That's 50% right there. We're going to kind of mix and match Castoria skills here to bring us up to full. And then we're going to utilize the Mystic Code NP Gen here. That's going to allow her to refund 71%. She's going to have the refund to bring her up, or sorry, the regen to bring her up to 80%. From there, we're going to only need one of the Castoria 20%, or sorry, the one remaining Castoria 20% skill there. That's going to bring her up to full. Fire off the NP one more time. You're going to refund 63% since you don't have the Mystic Code ability this time, but you do have an extra NP gain there. That's plus the 10% regen there is going to put you at 73. So then the remaining Castoria 30% charge is going to be enough for you to loop. So you do not have to use something like a plug suit basically with Vritra if you want her to still refund. Looking at the next scenario here, it's going to be 3-3x neutral. Again, this one is going to basically be plug suit with double Castoria Oberon, just kind of min-maxing the damage a little bit here. For here, you don't have to utilize the Append. You can just pop her charge skill there, turn 1. It's going to put her at 30%. Utilize all of one Castoria skills. That's going to put you at 80%, and then utilize the NP Gen skill to bring you up to 100. Fire off the NP. Refund 63%, and then from there utilize the remaining 30% Castoria and the 20% on Oberon to bring yourself pretty much to overkill at 113 there, and then you should refund back to 63% and then utilize the 50% remaining on Oberon plus his third skill to get even more damage output. And then last but surely not least is the 2-2x neutral scenario with Vritra. We're going to start out with her charge skill. Basically same deal as the prior comp here in terms of the charge situation. So again, you guys can see the only thing that's really going to end up changing are our refund numbers. Wave 1 here, we only refund 45%, but we have the 10% regen. It's going to bring us past 50. So we're going to still do the same allocation that we did before. That's going to bring us to 105. And then again, right there, we're going to fire off the NP the second time to bring us back to 45 again, plus another 10, bringing us to 50, plus the 50 remaining on Oberon. So you can see basically the prior comp was in both the second and third turns refund scenarios. They were overkill. They actually had too much charge. So now stepping down to 2 enemy waves because so much of Vritra's charge is kind of automated and locked in rather than refund based. She can kind of still make it work regardless of the enemy there. So that's why, again, you actually aren't losing that much, even though we're stepping down in terms of how much we're hitting. So it is a nice thing. She's definitely a robust and very adaptable looper in that regard. You have many scenarios for her that will work. Take a look at Vritra's actual damage numbers here. Again, these are neutral numbers, kind of in a vacuum. So it's just Vritra under her own power with her own skills. We're not including things like Mystic Codes, other support units, or again, basically any other source of external damage, just Vritra. And again, just neutral, not effective numbers here. So you guys can see at NP1, she's only going to be doing about 22k, but the Divine Power mod niche there, kind of extending it up to about 28k. Certainly some capacity here. I do feel like Vritra could get a NP interlude at some point in the future and it would not make her terribly broken, particularly if they did add some sort of additional niche to it that would really help her out, especially in the face of some of her competition like we're going to go over here in a minute. So again, you can see still fairly robust numbers, but not the greatest. And as you start to move down the NP levels here, you can see it definitely scales quite nice. But again, she is a permanent unit. So this is something you might have happen kind of over time if she just ends up spooking you. Or again, if you just find that you desire her and you want to roll for her, you can get the additional NP levels that way instead. Now taking a look at Vritra's actual damage numbers in a comp, these are still neutral numbers, but now we include things like Mystic Codes, Craft Essences, and support units. So again, 2 times Castoria Oberon with a level 100 Black Grail and a level 10 Neo Plug Suit. Basically at NP1, you got kind of poodoo damage there on Wave 1. Wave 2, you got that 115, and then Wave 3, you're going to have 251 neutral, so definitely not too bad. And then we come in with the Divine niche and the power mod starts to really help. Again, it would certainly be more powerful if it were super effective, but remember that her power mod is party wide, so it's not just for her. It can also be for other units. So that's why it's not necessarily as beefy as some other units' power mods are. But again, definitely solid damage there, especially in niche, and at NP2 and in niche, it certainly scales a lot more. Down here, we have a scenario where it's Vritra with 2x Castoria, Oberon, a level 100 Black Grail, and a Neo Plug Suit, but now it's a 2-enemy wave scenario. So again, the damage numbers are going to be a little bit worse, but certainly you're still able to pump quite a bit of firepower regardless. It's just going to kind of change the structure and the order of operations of things a little bit, but it's still a very viable setup. Now, let's look at some of her comparative units, some of her competition, people that basically people are going to look to compare Vritra to. So Ryoma here is going to be using a double Castoria Oberon and level 100 Black Grail setup with a maxed out Neo Plug Suit. You can see he's able to pull basically 301 there by wave 3. He's got, again, more kind of charge all at once in the 50% and basically a little bit more firepower, but he doesn't have that extra niche. He doesn't have, again, sort of the automation side of things that she does with the charge per turn and the ability to break up her charge some. So he's a little bit more restrictive in that regard, but he's still another unit that can Black Grail loop. We've also got Summer Melt. Now, Melt is a limited unit herself as well, but she's a 4-star, so some of you may have rolled her quite a bit. You may have gotten her all the way up to NP5. She can also do Black Grail. The big story with Summer Melt, as always, is going to be the first 2 waves are not that beefy at all, even at NP5. And then basically wave 3 is where she really pops off, both due to the synergy of Oberon with Black Grail, also due to the fact that this is when she activates her 3rd skill usually, which is a pretty robust steroid for her. It is a 1-turn duration alone though, so essentially you have to be a little bit careful with Melt in the earlier waves and hope that you have a robust enough one to be able to handle the content. Next up here, we've got Percy, and the advantage that Percy is going to have over someone like Summer Melt, and very similar to Vritra, is that Percy is a permanent unit. You can get spooked by him, you can get more, so looking at the NP5 is probably going to be a lot more viable numbers for him. And again, you can see he's definitely going to top out over someone like Vritra at that point, unless you have multiple MP levels of her. But still, even at NP1, his damage numbers are not terrible, and at NP2, they're already pretty much rivaling Vritra. So this may make some players think twice kind of about whether or not they wish to roll. Totally up to you. Just keep in mind, this has kind of always been the case. Lancers have always been a very competitive category, and the ebb and flow amongst them is very, very much, not set in stone. So keep in mind, it may be 1 buff for Percy or 1 buff for Vritra from this all changing. So it's just a thing that you have to kind of take in stride. We also end up having Britomart here, and Britomart did just get an upgrade on JP, if you guys will remember. So her damage numbers are certainly looking a lot better. She's able to do Black Grail looping with double Summer Scotty and Oberon. And again, having the Rider, and basically the ability to potentially stack them in terms of niches is certainly good. Just keep in mind that while you could get Rider will not ever be effective damage, so you'll never be able to 2 times this amount, as opposed to some of the other units out there with their niches actually being something that they could take against an effective unit. Erish is also here as a buster unit. Again, she's had her NP interlude giving her the Earth super effective damage. And you can see, especially now on JP with the ability to get her 5th Append, she can turn into a Black Grail looper. So it is a really nice thing for her nowadays, and something to look forward to if you're a big Erish fan, because this definitely allows her to pop off a lot harder due to that synergy. And this is kind of one of those textbook cases where you can just really see just how much of a difference it makes between a level 100 cranking, so a 50% charge C, and a level 100 Black Grail, and just the sheer firepower that it can cause and the disparity there. So this is why units that can touch Black Grail usually do a whole heck of a lot more than those that can't. So the second Erish gets to be able to touch that, Erish kind of catapults to one of the strongest AoE Lancers out there, and kind of deservedly so for a unit that has been at the back of the pack for many years. So she's definitely doing a lot better now with her NP interlude. Again, this really helps her out right here. But yes, in the future, she's going to get even more strong. Now, basically, we end up having Melisande, who is sort of the elephant in the room. You can see maybe why they made those changes to someone like Erish, because Melisande exists in this current form right now on NA. She still is at this point on JP. She has just kind of always been strong ever since she came out. Because again, she kind of came out there right at the same time as Oberon, and he just really, again, that synergy with Black Grail, with her being a buster unit, it just really helped things go crazy. This is just her NP1 numbers. Again, it's not necessarily the highest now, but it is still exceedingly high. And really, the anti-man niche is something that kind of any of the buster units can kind of use due to Okayest's presence in those systems. So again, nothing too crazy there, but yes, that does mean that that Melison's going to kind of be the unit to beat for the foreseeable future, at least until you end up where JP has with the 5th Append system. So it is something to pay attention to, and that I think as we kind of come back here, rein it all in, and revisit, you can see Vritra's numbers certainly not hitting those same like upper echelons that some of the other units do. NP2 really shores it up quite a bit, especially in the divine niche up here against a 3 enemy wave. But it's not necessarily going to be the end all be all. It will still be competitive with a unit like Melisson in niche, but Melisson will still out damage her kind of NP level for NP level, and especially so because these are NP2 numbers comparing to Melisson's NP1. So again, I do think Vritra's probably due in for an NP interlude. You can basically understand that if there were no other changes, that it would basically just be the same as taking NP2's numbers here and moving them over to NP1. And so you can kind of anticipate that, yes, like these would now be your new NP1 numbers. She still wouldn't necessarily be winning without some additional changes, but she would at least be in a much better state. And I'm not saying she necessarily has to pass Melisson either, given the fact that she is an arts looper and she is a permanent unit. But making her a little bit more competitive would probably help in that regard. So again, Vritra is not a bad unit, but Vritra is a unit in a highly competitive class, of which we have quite a few juggernauts as is. Vritra's main features are going to be the fact that she is permanent, and again, the fact that she can sort of buff the party with both that divine power mod as well as charge and NP damage. So it's definitely a nice thing for her to be able to do, but something that, again, I feel like you need to take in specific circumstances and know when to use her in order to be able to utilize her effectively. Let me know what you guys think about Vritra, and what change would you want to see them make to her kit? How do you think she could keep up and, again, kind of propel herself into a more competitive state? Be curious to hear you guys' thoughts, and I will see you guys for the next video. Thank you all for watching. Have a good one.